The fireworks painted the night sky above Elysium Prime, in colors that humans had brought from Earth, red and gold and bright blue. Explosions reflected off the glass towers of New Geneva, a city of 12 million souls celebrating the festival of first contact. 300 years ago, humanity had reached the stars and found they were not alone. Tonight, they celebrated that discovery. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka stood on her balcony, a glass of champagne in her hand. Beside her stood High Emissary Zorith of the Valeth hegemony, his tall gray form wrapped in ceremonial robes. The Valeth had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were ancient when humanity was still learning to farm wheat. Tanaka had spent her entire career building bridges between her young species and these powerful beings. "Your people know how to celebrate," Zorith said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Tanaka smiled. "We learned it from surviving. Every moment of joy matters when you know how quickly it can end." Zorath turned his dark eyes toward her. Something flickered in them. Something cold. A wise philosophy. The fireworks stopped. For a moment, Tanaka thought the show was over. Then new lights appeared in the sky. They were not fireworks. They fell in straight lines, burning orange as they entered the atmosphere. "What is that?" Tanaka whispered. Zora did not move. He did not look surprised. "Your species has risen too quickly, Ambassador. The hegemony has decided to correct this imbalance." Tanaka's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the balcony floor, but she did not hear it. The first kinetic strike hit the city center. The sound came a second later, a roar that shook the building to its foundation. Then another strike, and another. She turned to Zorith, her eyes wide with horror. "We had a treaty. We had peace." "You had permission to exist," Zorath replied. "That permission has been withdrawn." Across 12 human colony worlds, the same nightmare unfolded. The Valeth had planned this for years. They chose moments of celebration on each world. New Year festivals, harvest days, wedding ceremonies. They wanted humanity to remember that joy could become ash in an instant. On the colony of New Mumbai, 3 million people died in the first 10 minutes. On Prometheus Station, a research facility holding humanity's brightest scientists vanished in nuclear fire. On the farming world of Arcadia, bombardment ships targeted schools and hospitals first. The Valeth were not just attacking, they were sending a message. Humanity had seen war before. They had fought each other for thousands of years on Earth, but they had never faced anything like this. They had believed the galaxy was civilized. They had believed in treaties and laws and cooperation. Now they learned the truth. The strong did what they wished. The weak suffered what they must. On Earth, the emergency began with a single phone call. President General Marcus Chen was attending his daughter's birthday party when his secure line rang. He answered it with a smile still on his face. By the time he hung up, his smile was gone forever. Within the hour, the United Human Coalition's Emergency Council gathered in the deep bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. This bunker had been built during Earth's last great war, a war that had nearly destroyed the planet. It had not been used in 200 years. Now, its ancient lights flickered to life as the most powerful humans alive took their seats around a steel table. The casualty reports came in waves, each one worse than the last. 100 million dead, 150 million, 187 million, and rising. Council members wept openly. Some could not speak. Others shouted in rage, demanding answers that no one could give. Chen sat in silence. He watched the numbers climb. He watched his species die, and something changed inside him. Something that had been soft became hard. Something that had been gentle became cold. When the room fell silent, he stood. He walked to a wall safe that only the President General could open. Inside was a single red folder. Every human leader knew about this folder. Every one of them had prayed it would never be opened. Protocol Prometheus. Humanity's contingency for war against a superior enemy. A plan written by generals who understood that one day the galaxy might turn hostile. A plan that abandoned all hope of mercy or negotiation. They expect us to surrender, Chen said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. They expect us to beg, to plead for terms, to accept whatever scraps they offer us. He opened the folder. Inside were documents covered in dense text, plans for total war, economic conversion to military production, activation of sleeper cells on every colony, construction of weapons that humanity had sworn never to build. They think we are young, Chen continued. They think our 300 years among the stars make us children. They forget something important. He looked up at his council, his eyes burning. They forget that our species spent 10,000 years killing each other before we ever left Earth. They forget that every predator on our homeworld learned to fear the human gaze. They forget that we did not choose peace because we were weak. We chose it because we knew what we could become if we didn't. Protocol Prometheus was now active. Send a message, Chen ordered. All frequencies. Every language in the galactic database. I want every species in this galaxy to hear what I have to say. The transmission was simple. It contained no threats of specific retaliation. It made no demands. It simply stated the truth. To the hegemony of Valeth, you have killed our children. You have burned our worlds. You believe this makes us weak. You are wrong. You have awakened something that was sleeping. You have reminded us what we are. We are the species that hunted mammoths with wooden spears. We are the species that split the atom and walked on our moon. We are the species that chose peace because we were tired of war, not because we had forgotten how to wage it. You have taken that peace from us. Now we will take everything from you. We are coming. Message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had never heard of Earth listened in confusion. Species that had traded with humanity listened in shock. And the Valeth, sitting in their ancient throne rooms, heard the message and laughed. They had crushed hundreds of rebellions. They had broken countless species. What were humans but another primitive race that needed to learn its place? They would learn soon enough. On Elysium Prime, Ambassador Tanaka crawled through the ruins of her city. Fire surrounded her. Bodies lay in the streets. The sky was black with smoke. She had lost everything. Her staff, her friends, her belief that the universe was fair. But she was alive. And as she looked up at the dark sky, she made a promise. She would survive. She would find her way home. And she would watch the hegemony burn. The war had begun. 3 months had passed since the night the sky burned. 3 months of silence from the human colonies. 3 months of the Valeth, waiting for the surrender that never came. Admiral Threvax, the unbowed, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Behind him stretched the third fleet of the hegemony. 800 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Threvax had commanded this fleet for 2 centuries. He had conquered 40 species. He had never known defeat. The Kepler system lay before him. Long-range scans showed a single human colony on the 4th planet. The colony was already half destroyed from the first wave of attacks. Sensor readings indicated minimal defenses. A few orbital stations, some patrol ships. Nothing that could challenge even a fraction of his fleet. Standard subjugation formation, Threvax ordered. Destroy their orbital defenses, then begin ground bombardment. I want this finished before the next meal cycle. His officers obeyed without question. The fleet spread into attack position, moving through the system's asteroid belt toward the colony. Threvax watched the tactical display with bored eyes. This was not war. This was pest control. Then the asteroids began to move. At first, Threvax thought it was a sensor error. Asteroids did not move on their own. But the readings were clear. Thousands of objects in the belt were changing course, accelerating toward his fleet. "What is this?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the first railgun round struck his flagship. The impact shook the massive vessel. Alarms screamed. A second round hit, then a third. The asteroid belt had become a weapon. Hidden among billions of rocks, Humanity had built something the galaxy had never seen. They called it the Hydra Array. 40,000 autonomous platforms, railguns, missile pods, electronic warfare stations. Every rock within 1,000,000 kilometers was either a weapon or a sensor or a trap. All ships, defensive formation. Threvok shouted. But it was too late for formations. His fleet was already inside the trap. Weapons fire came from every direction. His ships tried to return fire, but for every platform they destroyed. 3 more activated human interceptors launched from hidden bases on nearby moons. They were tiny ships, barely large enough for a single pilot. Against Valith warships, they should have been meaningless. But the human pilots did not fight like any enemy Threvax had faced. They flew directly at his ships. Not to engage in combat, to ram them. The first interceptor struck the engine section of a Valith cruiser. The explosion tore the ship in half. More interceptors followed. Human pilots screamed war songs on open channels as they flew into certain death. They aimed for engine ports, weapon systems, bridge sections. They turned themselves into missiles. "They are insane," one of Threvax's officers whispered. No, not insane. Threvax understood what he was seeing. These humans had already accepted death. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to make the Valith pay the highest possible price for victory. The battle lasted 11 hours. 11 hours of constant combat, Valith ships burning, human platforms exploding, bodies and wreckage filling the void between worlds. When it finally ended, Threvax ordered a retreat. He had lost 612 warships. The humans had lost everything. Their Hydra array was destroyed. Their colony was defenseless. 80,000 human soldiers had died. By any normal measure, the Valith had won. But Threvax knew the truth. His fleet had killed 80,000 humans. The humans had killed 4 million Valith, and the humans had done it willingly. They had lined up for the chance to die if it meant taking Valith with them. He sent his report to High Sovereign Malachar on the throne world. He did not request reinforcements. He requested a meeting. The hegemony needed to understand what they were fighting. On Valith Prime, Malachar read the report in his throne room. Around him stood his advisors, the most powerful beings in the hegemony. They had expected news of easy victory. Instead, they received casualty figures that made them go pale. "One battle," Malachar said slowly. "One small colony. 4 million of our people dead. The humans are desperate," an advisor said. "Desperate species make foolish choices. They cannot sustain such losses." Malachar was not so sure. He had studied humanity before ordering the attack. He knew their history. He knew about their world wars, their genocides, their capacity for self-destruction. He had believed these things made them weak. Now he wondered if he had been wrong. "Send more fleets," he ordered. "Occupy every human world. But tell our commanders to expect resistance. Real resistance. Not the kind we have faced before." A new phrase entered the Valith military vocabulary. Commanders began speaking of acceptable cost and unacceptable cost. Before the war, any cost was acceptable if it achieved victory. Now, they had to calculate whether victory was worth the price. Humanity had taught the galaxy's oldest empire a lesson it had forgotten. War was not about winning battles. War was about making your enemy pay more than they were willing to pay, far from the front lines. In a secret facility hidden in the frozen darkness of the Oort cloud, Dr. Alina Vasquez worked without sleep. She led a team of humanity's greatest scientists, physicists, engineers, weapons designers. They had been gathered for a single purpose. Project Leviathan, the Valith had technology thousands of years more advanced than humanity. They had larger fleets, better weapons, more resources. In a fair fight, humanity would lose. So humanity would not fight fair. Vasquez stared at the prototype floating in the testing chamber. It looked almost beautiful. A sphere of perfect black, surrounded by rings of glowing energy. Inside that sphere, the laws of physics were being broken. Space itself was being folded, twisted, turned into a weapon. "The calculations are complete," her assistant reported. "It works. We can move matter instantly across any distance. We can strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning." Vasquez nodded. She should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt sick. She understood what this weapon meant. Not just for the war, but for the future. Once humanity crossed this line, there was no going back. "Begin full-scale production," she ordered. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "And may God forgive us for what we are about to do." Back on Earth, President General Chen received 2 reports on the same day. The first was from Admiral Okonkwo, the only fleet commander to survive the Battle of Kepler. He requested permission to begin a secret mission beyond Valeth space. He believed other species might be willing to join humanity's fight. The second report came from the Oort Cloud facility. Project Leviathan would be ready within 1 year. Chen approved both requests. He did not know if humanity would survive long enough to use either one. But he knew one thing, with absolute certainty. The Valeth had started this war expecting quick victory. They would not get it. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as children playing among giants. Now the children were fighting back, and the giants were beginning to feel something they had not felt in 10,000 years. Fear, 1 year into the war. The Valeth hegemony controlled every human colony world. Their flags flew over burned cities. Their soldiers walked streets once filled with human laughter. By every measure, they had one, but they controlled nothing. On every occupied world, human resistance fighters struck without warning. They attacked supply convoys. They sabotaged power stations. They killed Valeth soldiers in their sleep. The occupation forces lived in constant fear. A peaceful street could become a death trap in seconds. A friendly human face could hide a knife. The Valeth had conquered hundreds of species before. They had never faced anything like this. Other species surrendered when their armies were defeated. Humans did not seem to understand that they had lost. They kept fighting. They kept dying. They kept killing. Admiral Kenji Okonkwo had no time to think about the resistance. He had been given an impossible mission. Take the last surviving human warship beyond Valeth space. Find other species that might help. Build an alliance against the Empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. His ship was called the Defiant Hope. It was the only vessel to escape the Battle of Kepler. The hull was scarred with battle damage. Half the systems ran on emergency power. The crew had patched holes with salvaged metal and prayer, but the ship still flew, and that was enough. The journey took Okonkwo to places no human had ever seen. He traveled through dead systems where ancient wars had left only rubble. He passed through nebulae that glowed with the light of dying stars. He met species that had been conquered so long ago they had forgotten what freedom meant. His first success came with the chorus of Silent Thee. They were a hive mind species, millions of individual beings connected by thought. The Valeth had conquered them 8,000 years ago. They had altered the Silent Thee biology to prevent them from expanding, from growing, from ever becoming a threat again. The Silent Thee Queen received Okonkwo in a chamber deep beneath their world's surface. She was vast, her body filling the entire room. Thousands of eyes studied the human admiral. "You ask us to fight?" the Queen said. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We have not fought in 8,000 years. We have forgotten how." "Then we will teach you," Okonkwo replied. "And if we help you win, will you become what they are? Will you conquer and enslave as they did?" Okonkwo thought carefully before answering. He could have lied. He could have promised eternal peace and friendship, but lies would not build the alliance humanity needed. "I cannot promise we will always be good," he said. "War changes people. It changes species. We will do terrible things before this is over. But I can promise this. When the war ends, we will remember what we were before it began. We will try to be better. That is the only promise I can make." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Your honesty is either wisdom or foolishness. We will discover which together. The chorus of Silent Thee will join your fight." This More species followed. The Cathari were warriors who had been enslaved as shock troops for the hegemony. The Luminari were beings of pure energy, imprisoned as living power sources for Valith technology. The Vorn were engineers whose creativity had been crushed under 10,000 years of servitude. One by one, chains that had held for millennia began to break. But the Valith were not blind. High Sovereign Malachar watched the growing alliance with cold fury. He had underestimated humanity once. He would not do so again. In the dark corners of his throne room, he approved Operation Final Solution, a relativistic kill vehicle, a weapon that traveled at nearly the speed of light, carrying enough mass to shatter a planet. The target was Earth. The weapon launched in secret from a facility at the edge of Valith space. By the time human sensors detected it, the kill vehicle was already halfway to its target. Impact would occur in 6 months. 8 billion humans would die. The species would end. On Earth, President General Chen received the news in silence. He had known this moment would come. The Valith would not allow humanity to survive. They could not afford to. A species that refused to surrender was too dangerous to leave alive. Dr. Vasquez contacted him within the hour. Project Leviathan was ready. The dimensional displacement weapon could stop the kill vehicle. But there was a cost. The weapon requires enormous energy, Vasquez explained. Her face was pale on the view screen. To generate enough power, we need to tap into Earth's core. The process will cause massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. How many will die? Chen asked. Vasquez could not meet his eyes. 3 billion, maybe more. Half of Africa, most of Asia, the coastal regions everywhere. Chen felt the weight of the choice crushing him. 3 billion dead to save 5 billion. It was simple mathematics. It was also the murder of half a planet. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. We have 6 months. There is no other weapon that can stop a relativistic kill vehicle. It's Leviathan or nothing. Chen made a decision that no human leader had ever faced before. He broadcast the situation to every surviving human settlement, every colony, every hidden base, every resistance cell. He told them the truth. All of it, the kill vehicle. Leviathan, the cost. Then he asked them to vote. The responses came back within 1 hour. 94% voted to fire Leviathan. The messages that accompanied the votes were simple. From a resistance fighter on occupied New Mumbai, we are already dead. Save what you can. From a child on an orbital station, please save my grandmother. She lives in Australia. It's from an old woman in Beijing. I have lived long enough. Let the young ones have a future. 3 billion people voted to die so that 5 billion could live. Chen gave the order. Leviathan fired. The weapon worked perfectly. Space folded. The kill vehicle vanished from its trajectory, reappearing in the heart of a distant star. Earth was saved. Then the earthquakes began. Cities crumbled. Mountains split apart. The ocean rose and swallowed coastlines whole. 3 billion humans died in fire and water and crushing stone. Their screams echoed across every communication channel. Their final moments were broadcast to the galaxy. The Valith watched in confusion. They had expected humanity to simply die. Instead, humans had killed themselves to survive. They had chosen which of their own people would die. They had made the impossible choice and pulled the trigger themselves. High Sovereign Malachar sat on his throne, watching the death of 3 billion humans. He had ruled for 2,000 years. He had destroyed countless civilizations, but he had never seen anything like this. What are they? One of his advisors whispered. Malachar had no answer. He only knew that for the first time in his long life. He was afraid. The galaxy watched humanity sacrifice half their homeworld and keep fighting. Ancient species that had given up hope began to whisper. If humans could endure this, perhaps resistance was possible. Perhaps the hegemony was not as invincible as it seemed. Admiral Okonkwo received the news aboard the Defiant Hope. He wept for the dead. He wept for the living. He wept for what humanity had become. But when his tears were dry, he gathered his new allies and spoke the only words that mattered. We move forward. We have paid too high a price to stop now. The hegemony wanted to break us. They failed. Now we break them. The Liberation Fleet was born. Human, Silenthy, Cathari, Luminari, Vorn, former enemies united by a common cause. They had all suffered under the hegemony. Now they would end it together. The war had entered a new phase. The hunted had become the hunters. 2 years into the war, Project Leviathan had changed everything. The dimensional displacement technology gave humanity something no species had ever possessed: the ability to strike anywhere instantly without warning. A fleet could be orbiting a distant star one moment and appearing above an enemy world the next. Supply lines became meaningless. Fortress worlds became prisons. Admiral Okonkwo led the Liberation Fleet across Valeth. Space like a storm that could not be stopped. They did not conquer. They liberated. Every world they freed joined the growing coalition. Species that had been slaves for thousands of years suddenly had a choice. Most chose freedom. The hegemony was crumbling. Worlds that had been loyal for millennia now questioned their masters. Soldiers who had fought for the Empire began to wonder if they were on the wrong side. The certainty that had held the Valeth together for 10,000 years was falling apart. But as the war continued, Okonkwo faced a new enemy, one he had not expected, one that came from within humanity itself. General Victor Haas was a hero of the early war. He had led the defense of 3 colony worlds. He had lost his wife and children in the night of burning skies. He had every reason to hate the Valeth, and hate he did. At a coalition meeting aboard the command ship Unity, Haas stood before the assembled leaders. Human Silenthy, Cathari, Luminari, all of them united against the hegemony. All of them listening as Haas spoke words that chilled Okonkwo to his core. "We are winning," Haas said, "but winning is not enough. The Valeth tried to destroy us. They killed 200 million of our people in a single night. They forced us to kill 3 billion more to save ourselves. If we leave them alive, they will rebuild. They will remember. In 1,000 years, another Malachar will rise, and another species will burn." He paused, looking around the room. "There is only one way to ensure this never happens again. We must do to them what they tried to do to us. Complete extermination. Every Valeth world, every Valeth life. Wipe them from the galaxy." The room erupted. Some shouted in support. Others cried out in horror. The alien species watched with growing unease. They had joined humanity because humans promised to be different from the hegemony. Now a human general was calling for genocide. Okonkwo rose to speak, but someone beat him to it. Lieutenant Amara Jensen was 23 years old. She had been 14 when the Valeth attacked Elysium Prime. Her entire family had died that night. Her mother, her father, her little brother who had been 7 years old and afraid of the dark. She had survived only because she had been sleeping at a friend's house outside. The city she had every reason to want revenge, more reason than anyone else in the room. And yet she stood to oppose Haas. "My family is dead," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "I dream about them every night. I wake up reaching for my mother's hand. I hear my brothers laugh in empty hallways. The Valeth took everything from me." She turned to face Haas directly. "I have every reason to want what you want. Believe me, I have imagined it. Every Valeth dead. Every one of their worlds burned. I have dreamed of making them feel what I felt." Her voice grew stronger. "But my mother did not raise me to be a murderer. My father did not teach me that vengeance was justice. My brother did not die so that I could become a monster. If we do what you suggest, we become the very thing we are fighting. We prove that the Valeth were right about us, that we are just another violent species that will destroy anything we fear." She looked around the room, at the humans, at the aliens who had trusted humanity with their futures. "My family died believing we were better. I will not prove them wrong." The vote that followed was close, too close. But in the end, Jensen's words carried the day. The coalition voted against extermination. Humanity would seek justice, not revenge. Haas did not accept the decision. Within a month, he had gathered a third of the human fleet to his side. Officers who had lost too much. Soldiers whose pain had turned to hate. They called themselves the True Human Alliance. And they declared that the coalition's leaders had betrayed humanity's future. The Liberation Fleet now faced two wars. One against the hegemony. One against humanity's own darkness. High Sovereign Malachar watched from his throne world. For the first time in years, he smiled. He sent a secret message to General Haas. An offer of alliance. Together, they could destroy the coalition. Haas could have his revenge against the species that had killed his family. Malachar could preserve what remained of his empire. Haas accepted. The news reached Okonkwo on the front lines. He had just liberated a Luminari homeworld that had been enslaved for 3,000 years. The celebration turned to ash in his mouth as he read the report. Haas had joined the enemy. The human fleet was divided. The coalition was in danger of collapse. He found Jensen in the ship's observation deck, staring at the stars. She was no longer just a lieutenant. Her speech had made her a symbol of what humanity could be. People called her the voice of hope. Did I make a mistake? She asked without turning. Maybe Haas was right. Maybe we should have voted for extermination. At least then we would be united. Okonkwo stood beside her. The day we unite behind genocide is the day we lose everything worth saving. Haas has chosen his path. Now we choose ours. What path is that? We prove that humanity can be different. We prove that we can win without becoming monsters. And we stop Haas before he destroys everything we have built. Jensen nodded slowly. She turned to face him, and Okonkwo saw something in her eyes. Not hope, not despair. Something harder. Determination. Then we need to end this war. Fast, before Haas and Malachar can combine their forces. Okonkwo had already made the same calculation. The coalition could not fight a two-front war. They needed to strike at the heart of the hegemony before the alliance against them could solidify. One final battle. Winner take all, he gathered the coalition fleet commanders. Humans, Silanthi, Cathari, Luminari, and a dozen other species. They had come together as strangers. They had fought together as allies. Now they would gamble everything on a single assault. The target was Valeth Prime, the throne world of the hegemony, the seat of Malachar's power for 2,000 years. No enemy had ever reached it. No enemy had ever tried. If we take the throne world, the hegemony collapses, Okonkwo explained. Local commanders will have no central authority. The empire falls apart, and Haas. The Silanthi queen asked, Haas will come to defend Malachar. He has to. If Malachar falls before Haas gets his revenge, he loses everything. Okonkwo's jaw tightened. We will face both of them. At the same time, at the same place, the odds were terrible. The coalition would be outnumbered 2-1. They would face the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. They would fight enemies who had every reason to destroy them. But the coalition had something their enemies did not. They had species who had been freed from 10,000 years of slavery. They had soldiers who fought not for conquest, but for the right to exist as something better than they had been. They had hope. We attack in 3 days, Okonkwo announced. Prepare your fleets. Prepare your people. Tell them what we fight for. Not revenge. Not empire. A future where no species rules over another. A future worth dying for. The commanders dispersed to their ships. The final battle was coming. And the fate of the galaxy would be decided above the throne world of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. Jensen found Okonkwo alone in his quarters that night. He was looking at a photograph of his family on Earth. They had survived the earthquakes. They had survived Leviathan. They were waiting for him to come home. Are you afraid? Jensen asked. Okonkwo smiled sadly, terrified. But fear has never stopped humanity before. It won't stop us now. The final battle began in the shadow of Valeth Prime. 3 fleets converged on the throne world. The Liberation Coalition arrived first, emerging from dimensional space like ghosts becoming solid. Behind them came the true human alliance, General Haas's ships burning bright with stolen Valith technology. And rising from the planet itself came the remnants of the Hegemony Armada. The last defenders of a 10,000-year empire, Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the tactical display fill with enemy signatures. The numbers were worse than he had feared. 2-1 against the coalition. Perhaps worse. "All ships, hold formation," he ordered. "Wait for my signal." Valith struck first. Their weapons reached across the void, tearing into coalition ships. The Luminar flagship exploded in a burst of pure energy. The Cathari carrier broke apart under concentrated fire. The coalition lines buckled but did not break. Then Haas attacked. The true human alliance drove into the coalition's flank. Human fighting human. Brothers killing brothers. The ships that had once defended Earth now fired on each other with desperate fury. Okonkwo watched his fleet die and felt his heart breaking. "Admiral, we cannot hold," his tactical officer reported. "We need to retreat." "No," Okonkwo's voice was steel. "We hold the line, no matter the cost. This ends today." The battle raged for hours. Ships burned. Crews died. The void between the fleets became a graveyard of wreckage and frozen bodies. The coalition was losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were being ground down by superior numbers. And then something impossible happened. Valith ships began firing on each other. Okonkwo stared at the display in disbelief. Entire squadrons of hegemony vessels were breaking formation, turning their weapons on their own allies. Confusion spread through the enemy fleet. The coordinated attack became chaos. A communication request appeared on his console. The sender was Admiral Threvax, the same commander who had fought humanity at Kepler. The same enemy who had killed 80,000 human soldiers. Okonkwo accepted the request. Threvax appeared on the view screen. His gray face was unreadable, but something in his eyes had changed. Something that had been certain was now questioning. "I have watched your species for 2 years," Threvax said. "I have watched you fight each other, not over territory, not over resources. Over the question of whether to show mercy to your enemies." He paused. "For 10,000 years, I followed the hegemony because I believed strength meant cruelty, that conquest was the natural order, that mercy was weakness." He gestured at the battle raging around them. "Now I see humans willing to die to prove me wrong. I see a species that could destroy us and chooses not to. I do not understand you. Perhaps I never will. But I know this. I will not fire on you today." 40% of the hegemony fleet stopped fighting. The balance of the battle shifted. Haas's fleet, suddenly outnumbered, fell back toward the planet. The coalition pressed forward, driving through the chaos toward their 2 remaining targets. General Haas. High Sovereign Malachor. Lieutenant Jensen led the assault team that breached Haas's flagship. She moved through corridors filled with smoke and bodies, her weapon raised, her heart pounding. She had not wanted this mission. Okonkwo had insisted. He said it had to be her. He said Haas might listen to her when he would listen to no one else. She found him in the command center. The room was dark, emergency lights casting red shadows on the walls. Haas stood alone, a pistol in his hand. His uniform was torn. His face was bloody. He looked old. Old and tired and broken. "You should have let me finish this," he said. His voice was empty. "Now the Valith will rebuild. They will come back. In 1,000 years, another Malachor will burn another Elysium." Jensen lowered her weapon. "Maybe. 1,000 years is a long time. Long enough to build something better? You believe that?" "I have to. My family believed it. Everyone who died believed it. If I stopped believing, then they died for nothing." Haas laughed bitterly. "I used to believe too. Before they took everything from me, before I learned what the universe really is, the universe is what we make it." Jensen took a step closer. "You taught me that." Before the war, when you visited my school on Elysium Prime, you told us that humanity's greatest strength was not our technology or our weapons. It was our ability to choose who we wanted to be. Haas's hand trembled. The pistol wavered. I remember, he whispered. I remember believing that. Then believe it again. The war is over. We have won. Now we have to decide what winning means. Revenge or something better. Destruction or rebuilding. You can still choose. For a long moment, Haas was silent. Then, slowly, he lowered the pistol. He let it fall from his fingers. He looked at Jensen with eyes that held nothing but exhaustion. Take me to Okonkwo, he said. I will face human justice. Whatever that means. On the planet below, Admiral Okonkwo led a team into the heart of Malakur's palace. They fought through corridors of ancient stone and gold, past defenders who died to protect their sovereign. When they finally reached the throne room, they found Malakur waiting. The High Sovereign sat on a chair carved from the bones of 100 conquered species. He was ancient, his gray skin stretched tight over his skull, his eyes burning with intelligence that had watched empires rise and fall. He did not stand. He did not bow. He simply waited. So the humans have come to finish what they started, Malakur said. I am impressed, truly. No species has ever reached this room as an enemy. Okonkwo holstered his weapon. His soldiers looked at him in confusion, but he raised a hand to keep them still. We are not here to kill you. Malakur's eyes narrowed. Then what? You are going to live. You are going to watch your empire become a democracy. You are going to see your people choose peace because they want to, not because they are forced. You are going to see Valeth and humans working together as equals. Malakar laughed. You think you can change 10,000 years of history with kindness? No, I think we can change it with time. And I think you should be alive to see it. Okonkwo smiled grimly. In 100 years, when a Valeth child asks why there was ever an empire, you will have to explain. When they ask why their ancestors thought cruelty was strength, you will have to answer. That is human justice. Malakur stared at him for a long time. Then, for the first time in 2,000 years, the High Sovereign of the Valeth hegemony had nothing to say. The war ended with a whimper, not a bang. The hegemony surrendered. The true human alliance disbanded. The galaxy, which had trembled under the rule of ancient empires, began to rebuild under something new. 10 years later, the Galactic Commonwealth celebrated its first decade of existence. Representatives from 100 species gathered on Earth in a new city built where the old United Nations had once stood. The building was designed by Valeth architects and human engineers working together. Its walls were covered with the names of every being who had died in the war. All of them. Human and alien. Coalition and hegemony. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, the woman who had watched the first bombs fall on Elysium Prime, addressed the assembled representatives. They thought they could break us with fire, she said. They learned that humans are forged in fire. But the war taught us something too, that strength without mercy is just cruelty with better weapons. We choose to be more. In a quiet corner of the celebration, Admiral Threvac shared a drink with Admiral Okonkwo. They had been enemies. Now they served together on the Commonwealth Security Council. Neither of them had expected to live this long. Neither of them had expected to become friends. Your species, Threvac said slowly, is the most terrifying thing I have ever encountered. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. Because we fight? Because you stop. Threvac looked at the crowd around them. Valeth children playing with human children? Kethari warriors laughing with Luminari scholars. The galaxy reborn. Any species can make war. Yours is the first I have seen choose to make peace while still capable of genocide. That is why the galaxy trembles. Not because you might destroy us, but because you might change us. Okonkwo was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. That was always the plan. Somewhere in the crowd, Lieutenant Jensen stood with her hand on her stomach. She was pregnant now. Her husband was a Valeth doctor she had met during the reconstruction. Their child would be the first human-Valeth hybrid ever born. When she had told Okonkwo, he had asked if she was afraid. Terrified, she had answered, "But fear has never stopped humanity before. It won't stop us now." The galaxy had trembled when humanity declared war. Now it trembled for a different reason. Not fear of destruction. Hope for something better.